Hi, everybody. It's Gertrude Mache again, your book writing coach for how to write a book in 40 hours. In today's video, I want to try and focus on helping you develop your book and, in particular, to work on structure. Now, every single book or every single story should have an arc. And the arc of a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has to have an Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. These are the three main parts of any story you'll ever meet. They are connected by what are called plot points. Plot point 1 comes at the end of Act 1 and beginning of Act 2. And plot point 2 begins at the end of Act 2 and beginning of Act 3. So let's go back and look at each act. In Act 1, you are focusing on setting up your story. You introduce the main characters who are going to be in the book. You give a brief description of who they are, where they're from, and how they're connected. In Act 2, you're focusing on the confrontation. This is where all the action happens. What happens to your characters in the story? Are they happy? Are they sad? In Act 3, you focus on the resolution or how the story actually comes to an end. So in any book or any story you want to write, you have to have very clear those 3 points. And your plot point 1 and plot point 2 are there to connect the acts together. It's an incident or something that happens at the end of Act 1 that helps you transition your story into Act 2, that then help you transition the story from the end of Act 2 to the beginning of Act 3. Now, when I started looking at story structure, I had a difficult time, trying to get all of this together. And I decided to put this particular information in this workshop to help all of you not struggle the same way that I did. So, in the beginning, in the setup, you need to focus on the theme that's being expressed throughout the book. The theme of every story is an invisible thread that binds the book together from beginning to end. For those of you who've read my first memoir, it's called Born on the Continent, Ubuntu. It is a memoir that has a theme to it. I used an African philosophy called Ubuntu to bind my books together. I wanted to illustrate how this philosophy has impacted on me as an African person throughout my travels around the world. And it's actually helped me create a niche or a genre for myself that has me lecturing in social anthropology throughout the world. Because the Ubuntu philosophy is not well known, it's not well documented, because a lot of African knowledge is passed down through storytelling. So a lot of our wisdom is not written down. And now I get invited to lecture at universities. I've actually had 3 amazing lecturing opportunities at a university in Pittsburgh, in New Mexico, in Boston, and I didn't plan it. It happened by accident. My apologies there. I will just pause the video and switch off my alarm. I apologize for that. I had to just get off and switch off my alarm. In your setup, there has to be an inciting incident. What is the one event that can be so gripping and so interesting, it will keep your reader holding your book from beginning to end? It doesn't have to always be dramatic, but if it is, it's something that will suck your reader into your story and help hold them captive. It could be a call to adventure, or it could be a fateful decision that your character makes that spurs the whole theme of your story. Once you get to the middle, there is no turning back. The story is now fully underway. Your adventure begins and things get serious. So you have to thrust your reader into a new world from where you were in the beginning to the middle part of your story. And your reader has to be able to explore this new world in ways that you describe. When you get to the midpoint, it's actually the middle of your book. Again, you have to think, what is going to be at the heart of the book that binds the story together? And the later part of your Act 2, maybe all is lost. Maybe it is the darkest hour for your character. Or it could be a false victory or a defeat. And then you come to the end of Act 2, which leads you on to Act 3, where you then resolve the story by either regrouping. You could go into battle if it's a battle scene. You could return to the normal world, or you could revisit the theme again. And when you come to the end of your book, be very strategic on how you're going to end it. You can't stop. You have to leave your reader in a position where they can't stop thinking about the story. So I hope this helps you think very, very clearly. And it doesn't matter whether you're writing fiction or whether you're writing a memoir. You have to keep your reader engaged from beginning to end. And I'll actually give you a worksheet that goes with this book so that you can see how to structure your book for yourself before you even begin writing the book. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about in this section is the shape of stories. Most books have already been written, and there is a shape to every single story or a paradigm that you can apply to every single story in the world. The basic ideas that come through are very common, and the shape of society stories help us as readers create paradigms that have been created already. So I'll give you a few of these shapes. Number one, the man in the hole. This is where your main character gets into trouble, then gets out of it again, and ends up in a better off place through that experience. How many books have you read that are like that? Another example is Boy Meets Girl. This is where the main character comes across something absolutely wonderful. They get so lost in it, or they lose it, and then it gets back to being there forever. The next one is A Bad to Worse. This is where your main character starts off poorly and gets continually worse with no hope of improvement. There's a lot of examples of books like this. The next type of book is Which Way is Up? This is a story that has a lifelike ambiguity that keeps us from knowing if the new development is good or bad. And I think I successfully managed to do this with my book because it had a lot of ups and downs in it. Hamlet is a good example of that kind of a story. The Sopranos as a movie script is another example. The next one is the creation story. Now, in many cultures, they are creation stories. And this is where humankind receives incidental gifts from a deity. The first thing that most people learn through these kind of stories is to explain sometimes the universe, for example. And it's not a very common shape for modern Western stories, but it is a very common shape for a lot of ethnic stories. And being from Africa, I can really relate to this myself. The next type of story is the Old Testament. This is where humankind again receives gifts from a deity, but is suddenly ousted from good standing in a fall of an enormous proportion. Great Expectations is an example of this type of book. In the New Testament, this is another shape of a story. Humankind again receives incremental gifts from a deity and is suddenly ousted from the good standing, but then receives some other types of bliss. I go back again to Great Expectations with Dickens and all of his alternative endings. And then we have the Cinderella story. Now, I think we're all very, very familiar with this, where your character starts off at a very disadvantaged point in their lives, and throughout the story, it gets better and better and better for them. So I hope this has helped you a little bit understand the shape of stories. And in the next module, I want to focus on how to help you structure your book or your novel's chapters. So catch you in the next module. Bye for now.